Okay, so we've got the most important part of being a freelance photojournalist out of the way. In the first video, we talked about how the first step is you have to be willing to ask for payment. And we've gotten to the point of, hey, now you're negotiating payment. So now let's talk about the second most important part, which is not nearly as exciting, but is still super important. And that is all the fun paperwork you have to fill out if you're going to be a freelance photojournalist, as well as some tips on how to make it easier along the way. One of the first things you're going to need to do is fill out what's called a W-9. This is a form that comes from the IRS and can be found on the IRS's website. And what it does is certifies that you are either a United States citizen or you're on a proper United States visa in order to get paid legally in the United States. Now, if you're in a situation where you have neither of those things, neither United States citizenship or a legal visa, I would suggest getting in contact with some folks who can help answer questions you may have about freelancing a little bit better than I can. That's a little bit beyond my pay grade. But for now, let's just talk about it in terms of, let's assume you either are a United States citizen or have a legal visa. This is, again, the W-9. It's relatively straightforward. It just needs your name, your address, your social security number, etc. Now, these are annoying because you have to fill out each and every one of these for every publication you're going to freelance for. It doesn't matter if it's one, or if you're freelancing for 5 different publications, you have to fill out 5 of these and file them with each individual publication. So that means they do kind of suck, but the good news is that you only have to do them once. If you freelance for a company for 10 years, you only have to fill out one W-9. You fill it out once, and you're done. Now the next step, once you have the W-9 filled out and filed with the publication that you are going to be freelancing with, the next step is to find a template for a contract. The contract is how you will sort of get into writing all of the actual details of the work you'll be paid for. And these are incredibly important, so you ought to make sure you find a good one. There's a lot of these on the internet you can find for photography, for photojournalists specifically. I really like this one. It's by a photographer named Susie Pratt, suzi-pratt.com. She has posted this on the web for people to use as a template if they'd like to, or at least to base theirs off of. And notice that there are a couple sections here at the top. There's prepared by, that's where you would put your name and information. Prepared for, that's where you would put the people who are going to be paying you. And then prepared on, the date and time in which the contract was drafted. You have the photographer's fee, which is how much money you'll be getting paid. The deposits, which is really only used if you are going to be going out and shooting something ahead of time, or you're negotiating something that you'll be shooting ahead of time, and that you want to get paid in advance somewhat for, as well as a couple clear stipulations. Now, whatever template you use, you absolutely have to have the 4 following things. Otherwise, you'll have an incomplete contract. If you take an incomplete contract to a publication, they may laugh you out of the room. So you need to find a contract template that has at least these 4 things. 1, what is the final product you're delivering? So it's going to be a flash drive with photographs of the county fair and captions for each of the photographs. There will be at least 50 photographs. Something detailed like that. What is the final thing you are giving to the publication? Number 2, what payment forms are you going to accept and when will the payments be due? This could be something like, I will only take checks, I'll only take cash, I will take credit cards, but they will have a certain amount of fee. I'll take it via PayPal, but you can oftentimes include a fee. You can accept it via Venmo, that's an option now as well. One of the things you'll note in that a lot of contracts will have added fees in the payment forms for something like PayPal or credit cards. That's because if you sign up for a bank or sign up for a credit card for a business or to use for business purposes, they charge you a fee. What you then do is calculate how much that fee is in percentage and add it to that payment so that you're not the one paying it, the company paying you is. 3, you want to know when will you deliver the photos. So you absolutely have to deliver your end of the bargain by what date and time. And 4, how are you delivering the final product? So is it going to be via flash drive? Is it going to be a drop in a Dropbox? What is it going to be? You need to have these 4 things on here, and the other company, or the company you're working with, needs to agree to these as well. And the final step is to have an invoice. An invoice acts as sort of a final bill and receipt for the work you're doing. This is what you're going to present to the company for the work you've done or will do. And it's very simple. It looks like this. There's a place in the top for your name, keeping track of invoice numbers. So you want to number these start with 1, keep going from there. Description for the work you're doing, the date, the hours, the rate, the fee, the amount. Add all that stuff up, and at the end you have a final bill to give to the company you're working for. If you're pitching something you're going to do ahead of time, so let's say you go to the publication and say, hey, I'm going to take pictures of the county fair, it's next week. What you want to do then is make sure that you get everything in writing and signed off on before you go and shoot. You want to make sure that you are saying how much you are going to be getting paid for it, how much work you're going to be putting in, and getting it signed. That way, there's no wiggle room for them to try to change it on you. You don't want to rely on just a handshake here. You want to get it in writing, because what could happen is something like you agree on $200, you go out and take the pictures and bring it back, and they say, ooh, we don't really like these pictures that much, we'll only pay you $100 for these. Well, you've already agreed on $200, and unless you have it in paper form, unless you have it in writing, you're never actually going to be able to prove that. So you want to make sure this is signed before you go out and start shooting. If you've already shot the photographs, if this is something where you were in the right place at the right time for some breaking news, make sure you have your invoices ready to go. They're saved on your computer somewhere you know where to get to them, and that you can very quickly send them to whoever it is that's asking to use your work, so that you are clear, hey, this is how much I'm willing to charge for photographs. Make sure you have them ready to go. And that brings me to a point, another quick side point here. If you're going to be serious about being a freelance photojournalist, you need to hop in a time machine. You need to go back to the 80s, and you need to buy a fax machine. You actually don't really need to do all that. You can just go to Amazon. You either need to have a fax machine or a scanner, because you need to be able to send these contracts, you need to be able to send these invoices back and forth to companies in order to get paid properly, in order to get this done in a timely manner, in order to have certified copies with signatures on them. You can either get a scanner or a copier. In general, fax machines nowadays are a little bit cheaper, so you know what? For $40 you can get yourself a fax machine and all will be well. And that brings me to this. You need to make sure you're using that fax machine and you're using that telephone to follow up on your invoices. You don't want to let this go longer than 2 weeks after a contract agreement. So let's say that your contract says that you will go and shoot the county fair next week, and that you will expect to get paid a week after that. If you go 2 weeks longer than what the deadline initially listed on the contract, don't be afraid to bug them. You need to call them each and every single day until they pay you. It's easy for freelancers to get lost in the system. You deserve to get paid. You're not going to burn a bridge if you do this. Call them every day until you get paid. If you're pitching something to them prior to when you're actually going out to work on it, it's a good idea to see if they pay out for vehicle mileage. That may be a situation where the individual publication does or doesn't by their own rules. You also have the ability, because you're a freelancer, to make your own rules on that. So you can say, you know what, I want to get paid X amount of a dollar per every mile I drive to work on this story, and you need to keep track of that yourself. Back when I was doing this kind of thing, it was about 42 cents a mile. So that's probably has changed since then. So just make sure you know what regular publications are paying out, and make sure you know what other freelancers are charging for mileage. That brings us to another good point, which is if you're going to do this, if you're going to try to do freelance photojournalism and make some good money off of it, you need to network with other shooters. This is a good way for you to meet other people. It also is a good way for you to know what other people are getting paid, how much they're getting paid, and with whom they're getting paid. Because oftentimes the fastest and easiest way to get new opportunities, new gigs, find out about new publications, find out ways of getting paid from companies that may need some photographic work, is from other photographers. This is not a real cutthroat thing. No one's going to lie to you. No one's going to get mad if you ask, hey, where are you shooting nowadays? Where are you getting paid from? How much are you charging nowadays? People will help each other out in the freelance photojournalism world. There's kind of an understanding that we're all in this thing together. So Be nice to people, network with people, be friendly with them, and you'll be amazed at how that can lead to new opportunities. There's also a lot of great opportunities on the web too. Photo.net is a social networking site specifically for photographers and photojournalists. There's a lot of great stuff here for freelancers. There's a great ways to get your work critiqued, to look at and talk to other people about situations they've gone through with tricky billing and how they fixed it. And Reddit can be an awful place sometimes, but Reddit actually has a really great photojournalism section. It's Reddit/r/photojournalism. It's a really great tight-knit community of photojournalists. A lot of them are freelancers. So if you ever have a question about, hey, I'm in this situation, I'm sending an invoice, I'm not getting any response, what do you think I should do? If you post it there, you'll get really good, honest responses from the people. As well as if you just want to post some photos you're working on there, you'll get really good critiques from the folks there. They're a bunch of they're good people. So now comes the most boring thing possible I could ever imagine teaching in a photojournalism class, but it's super important, and that is how to pay your dang taxes. Inevitably, if you are going to do any sort of serious photojournalism work, your taxes are going to be complicated. I'm sorry to say it, but you're going to enter into a very complicated world with the IRS. But we can make it a little easier if we know some base rules. Base rule number 1, I am not a tax attorney nor an accountant, so please double check everything I say before you actually go out and do it, because it won't help you at all if you get audited to say, Dr. Riley told me this. But here's what I know. If you make more than $400 freelancing in a given year, you have to file that with the government, regardless if you're already exempt from paying income tax, and regardless if that amount of money is not actually going to impact your returns or your filing rate or anything like that. If you make at least $400, you have to tell the government about it, and that's the rule. If you don't, you're really just begging to get audited. So if you make at least $400, you got to tell the government, you got to file with it. Which means that you really need to keep track of every single invoice throughout the year. There's a reason why on the top of the invoice template it says invoice number. Keep track of them, because if the government ever decides to say, hey, we're going to audit this individual, we're going to find out how much money they're actually making, you can show this is how much exactly I was paid based on these invoices. At the end of the tax year, you are going to get from every single publication you freelanced for, every single publication that paid you is going to send you what is called a 1099. A 1099 is an IRS form that shows how much you were paid as a freelancer or temporary contract worker. You need to make sure that you are on the lookout for these in the mail when they're about to come, or ask if the place you're working for has some sort of online system to access them, and you need to keep good track of these. You're going to get one for every place you freelanced for in a given year. Here's where a lot of photojournalists will go wrong, especially the first time they try to make it as a freelance photographer. Please, if you've made it this far into the video, please make sure you pay attention to this. The paychecks you will be getting as a freelancer have not had any withholding income tax removed from them. You have not paid in income tax, you have not paid into Medicare or Medicaid, you have not paid into Social Security. You have a pure untaxed paycheck, which the government will not abide by in the end, which means that all of the withholding, all of that tax that normally would come out of a paycheck but doesn't because it's freelance, you will need to pay that come April 15th. Which means, please, 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 if you are going to freelance, put money aside to pay your taxes at the end of the year, because you will end up owing money in taxes. You will not get a return largely if you are a freelancer. You will owe money in taxes every year, because the paychecks you're getting don't have deductions in them like everyone else's does. I've had really good friends who've been freelance photographers and freelance reporters who, not knowing this, have thought their paychecks were really large and awesome and have spent lots and lots of money, not realizing that when it comes time for taxes and April 15th rolls around and they owe perhaps $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 and they have no idea where to get that from. Put money aside if you're going to freelance. One of the good sides, although that is really scary, one of the good things is that if you're going to freelance, you can deduct the cost of camera gear as an expense. So camera gear itself, lenses, flashes, filters, tripods, camera bags. You can deduct that from your taxes, and that'll help ease the burden of that a little bit, but it means you need to keep track. You need any receipt from any purchase about that you, any product that you bought in order to help you be a freelancer. You need to keep the receipt on in order to prove that you purchased it for deductions. And that leads us to our final point here, and it's a tricky one, and one that is sort of special to the United States because we cannot figure out how to do proper healthcare like the rest of the world. If you intend to be a full-time freelancer, you're going to have to figure out how to get healthcare. In the United States, healthcare usually comes in the form of health insurance that you get from a full-time employer. However, if you're a freelancer, even if you're making enough money to survive full-time, you're not actually employed full-time to get insurance from anyone. So right now, as it stands, your main goal here, or your main opportunity here, would be to buy a health insurance package from the ACA marketplace. Politically, though, the ACA, aka Obamacare, is sort of always up in the air. It kind of could get repealed at any moment now. So just make sure that you're careful in paying attention to how healthcare works in the United States, because inevitably, like I said, as a freelancer, you will need to buy healthcare. With that, we have covered the boring yet somehow really interesting ways of being a freelancer as far as paperwork goes. And like I said, I'll post the templates for all the paperwork I use in this example onto the Canvas site. If you ever have any questions about freelancing and you have an opportunity in this semester to do it, send me an email. I would love to hear about it.